Warning, spoilers for the two characters that will be mentioned in this video, since I will be using their best feats shown in the latest chapters of their respective series. What's up guys, Capram Master Upright Sensei signing in. Welcome back, Happy New Year's. The 8 handles sword Divergent Sealer Divine General Mahoraga is the most powerful Shikigami that can be summoned from the 10 Shadows technique by Megumin Fushiguro. Using hand signs, out of Mahoraga there are 9 other further level Shikigamis that do not even compare, since Mahoraga has always been uncontrollable by the summoners throughout all of history. Megumin can hide inside the shadows of others around him to avoid attacks and sneak up on opponents. This also means he can carry around weapons inside his own shadow. He is also able to make shadow clones of himself as well. With his domain expansion, Chimera Shadow Garden, he can flood an entire area with shadow and put a barrier around it. And because shadows are formless without mass, the victims would indefinitely fall into them. So when the domain is closed, they technically be gone forever. The first of the summons are the pair of divine dogs, one of which are black, while the other is white. They are good at tracking and battling other further level fighters, although they later fuse together to become even stronger. A large wolf called Totality. Next is Nue, which is a giant flying electric thunder owl. Then there is Toad, which is a toad with quick reflexes, a long tongue capable of pulling the summoner out of danger. Following that is Grey Serpent, which delivers speedy surprise attacks. Max Elephant would be the next Shikigami we have seen. It creates massive amounts of water and can simply be summoned on top of the opponent themselves. Rabbit Escape is one of the most frequently used Shikigami, since it's a swarm of 100 rabbits that is used as a distraction, although they can throw hands. Round there is the next Shikigami that is able to heal others with reverse curse technique. Next is Piercing Ox that deals insane damage if it runs in a straight line for long enough. Tiger Funeral is the 9th shadow, but we haven't seen it on its own since it ended up fusing with Nui Totality. So last but definitely not least, we have with this treasure I summon a monstrous that very few in his verse could even handle, being that it ended up killing the previous 10 shadow users and 6 eyes limitless user. Even Sukuna, the king of curses, had to acknowledge this creature when he saw it in action. Mahoraga. Mahoraga possesses the Sword of Extermination, which is shrouded in positive curse energy, capable of one-shotting cursed spirits, but it can also switch to cursed energy, which slowly poisons and kills human opponents. As you can already tell by his build, his physical strength is also no joke, since he can violate most characters in his verse in hand-to-hand combat, casually toss trains and skyscrapers at his opponents mid-battle, change his size to become as big as buildings, and he even has the ability to adapt to any and all phenomenon he's been exposed to. All it takes is for the 8-handled wheel on his head to turn, and he will begin to slowly adapt a resistance or counter to an attack or ability. Even if the user is knocked out, it is still possible for Mahoraga to come out to keep fighting if he or his wheel was summoned against that opponent prior. And once he starts adapting, any injury or wounds he has suffered will quickly be healed, and it will be nigh impossible to harm him with the same attack again, since he'll keep adapting even to the point that he'll be able to see invisible things the attacks produce coming his way. He'll adapt to change the nature of his energy. He'll adapt to change the nature of the energy he uses to be better suited to deal with his opponents. If he is hit by an attack more than once, the only thing it'll achieve is speeding up his adaptation process. So the only way to defeat him is to hit him with a brand new attack strong enough to overcome his durability while being something he hasn't yet adapted to. since after being hit by multiple cleaves and dismantle attacks in the anime, Mahoraga began adapting to the slashes as a whole in general, so later he was able to cut through space and existence itself when he adapted to a spatial ability. If Mahoraga is tamed and understood by its users, then they'd gain the ability to manifest its 8-handled wheel for themselves to adapt to attacks they've been exposed to. This strategy prevents Mahoraga from being destroyed, so if the user isn't able to win, they can still summon Mahoraga and he'll gain all the resistances they've managed to stockpile while possessing the wheel in battle. The Dharma wheel is able to allow those possessing it to even adapt to tricky strategies that may outsmart its mindless, chaotic nature. But if Mahoraga or anyone of the other 10 shadows is destroyed, then the user will be unable to summon them again, or else the user combines them to create a brand new summons. This doesn't mean the wheel isn't able to adapt to hacks that are infinitely effective though, since that would only take his wheel 7 to 9 spins to overcome if it isn't able to one-shot him before he completes the process of adaptation. For example, Mahoraga can adapt to the concept of any and all slashes, regardless of how powerful they may be. He can adapt to Gojo's infinite barrier that artificially divides space infinitely to prevent attacks from reaching him. Gojo's infinite void, which forcefully injects infinite levels of infinite knowledge into its opponent's brains. Yorozu's domain expansion perfect spear, which possesses infinite points, is infinitely dense, infinite mass one-hit KO. Obviously, normal Megumin will die if he uses Mahoraga, but if Mahoraga manages to beat his opponent, then technically it's a tie. So I'm basing this matchup on the potential of a full power Megumin who has mastered the 10 shadows to the level of the king of frauds himself. So people can stop slandering Megumin himself. Meet Reinhard Van Astrea, the 20-year-old sword saint of the kingdom of Lugunica, the strongest hero in all of ReZero because of the mere fact that he's beloved by the world itself. Odd Lugna. Excess mana circulation, constitution, or the defective gate is a condition he suffers from. Therefore, he is completely unable to use magic, but he can still take in mana from his opponents, allies, and the environment itself to increase his own strength, speed, and durability. He is also effectively immune to magic because of this. He is unable to make contract with spirits to become a spirit art user, but lesser spirits constantly tries to heal him while he is engaged in battle. Healing spells cast towards him instantly gets redirected to any of his allies if he has any though. He's also probably the guy who is gonna push this video over 20 minutes long because of all of the divine protection he possesses. Yes, divine protections. In the world of ReZero, these are rare abilities bestowed to characters by the world Odd Lugna at their birth, and there are many who are born without any at all. Odds for useless ones are 1 in 100, odds for useful ones are 1 in 1,000, odds for rare ones are 1 in 10,000, up to 1 in 10 million for having more than one at all. Don't get it mixed up though, these are tricks, gifts, and laws embedded into the world, but they aren't absolute since authorities always takes priority and bypass them every time they clash. The divine protection of the Sword Saint, a unique divine protection said to come from the Sword God and is only passed down to the Van Astrea family, allowing the user to draw out their maximum potential during combat. Understand everything about a sword with only a glance. See any and all flaw in an opponent's fighting style. He essentially gains aimbot in the form of white lines that guides him to what way to swing to maximize both offensive and defensive capabilities at once. He received this divine protection only at the age of 5 years old, and he's also innately able to know who is his successor if there ever is one. With access to the Dragon Sword Reed by proxy of being the Sword Saint, the only one capable of drawing this blade, since it's one of 10 overpowered enchanted sword blades in the verse. Reinhard is granted the ability to cut what cannot be cut. He can usually be seen carrying this blade around by his side while he's on duty, but he can only draw it from its scabbard if the sword itself deems his opponent as worthy to be killed by its awesome slashes. Speaking of which, its signature slash is an attack called Slash of the Dragon Sword Reed. This move gathers all mana in the area towards the blade before unleashing an extremely destructive slash capable of cutting the sky, space, or even the planet itself in half. This obviously takes out the world before causing it to be reborn/reset without the person he had hit existing in it. Divine Protection, Item Mastery, or Handling allows him to immediately master any weapon he holds. Divine Protection of Weapon God, which makes him automatically master any weapon even if he's never seen or used it before. Divine Protection of Unharmed Mastery makes him pretty much as skilled without a weapon, so he can still cut things and replicate the functions of other weapons. He can wish for any divine protection he wants as long as it exists and isn't the only of its kind that can exist at a time, since he'd have to rob the current owner. The Divine Protection of Judgment grants him the ability to see the divine protection anyone else has. Divine Protection of Mind Changing simply allows Reinhard to change the mind of anyone he spoke to. However, due to a very sad backstory, he disabled this ability. Divine Protection of Phoenix allows him to resurrect once if he somehow dies, but keep in mind, after he respawns, he'll immediately be given the Divine Protection of Phoenix next, and so on, because according to Tapai Nagasuki, the author of ReZero, the process will continue endlessly, with the name of the Phoenix Divine Protection changing very slightly each time because the world refused to allow Reinhard to die, but to re-obtain the exact same one-time used Divine Protections once already used. Divine Protection of Initiative makes it that he's always able to land the first attack and becomes virtually immune to being ambushed. Divine Protection of First Sight causes the first attack thrown against him to automatically miss, even if he's sleeping, or else he willingly decides to take it, since he himself will also be instinctively able to counter or dodge it if he deems necessary. The only known counter is an attack that cannot be avoided or blocked. Divine Protection of Second Sight allows him to respond even faster than First Sight if he's seen or experienced an attack for the second time. With First and Second Sight combined, any attack you send his way cannot land if it doesn't land the first time. Divine Protection of Projectile Evasion causes all projectiles such as arrows, knives, or whatever thrown at him to effectively change their direction enough to always miss, or else they exist outside of the world's influence. The Divine Protection of Salt Draft allows him to know all escape routes for anywhere he may be. The Divine Protection of Gardening grants him the ability to learn how to garden much faster. The Divine Protection of Sand Play prevents Reinhard from ever sinking into sand. The Divine Protections of Fogs allows him to see clearly through fog. Divine Protection of Lightning Cloud prevents him from ever being hit by lightning. Divine Protection of Water, Earth, Fire, Wind, Light, and Shadow causes 80% of the magic from all these types to be dispersed or neutralized. Water is partially reflected, fire damage is partially cut down, wind is partially absorbed, earth is partially weakened, partially nullifying yin, partially transferring yang back towards the target. Divine Protection of Morning Sky is basically Escanor, since he gets stronger when the sun is out. Divine Protection of Blue Sky makes him even stronger when the sky is blue. Divine Protection of Night Sky, Terry Sky, Rainy Sky essentially does the same as Blue Sky. Divine Protection of Power Bleeding makes him stronger the more he bleeds. Divine Protection of Telepathy is pretty self-explanatory. The Divine Protection of Anesthesia/Disease Immunity. The Divine Protection of Detoxication/Poison Immunity. The Divine Protection of the Child of the Wind illness immunity and the divine protection of anti-magic is also self-explanatory. But in short, he is basically immune to all curses, debuffs, and buffs. The divine protection of anti-malignance makes him highly resistant to witches' miasma that makes people go insane. The divine protection of training grants him the ability to learn faster and train others even better. The divine protection of instruction allows him to guide his students even better. Divine protection of lakes allows him to walk on all forms of water. Divine protection of clouds makes it that he is also capable of walking on gas, vapor, liquid we call cloud. Divine protection of air dashing makes him able to kick to fly through the air. The divine protection of wind evasion is usually owned by all earth dragon, but of course because Reinhard is built different, he also has it too, making him simply not affected by wind and resistance while he's in motion, which applies to anyone or anything he is in contact with, like a person he's carrying or an animal he's riding. This one actually has a weakness though, since it's active, not passive, and has a cooldown. That doesn't matter though, since he has the divine protection of swift running that also allows him to move at insanely fast speeds. The divine protection of riding vehicles and the divine protection of riding animals, which allows him to pretty much ride anything. Divine protection of fried, roasted, steamed, baked, boiled makes him cook even better, but still he has a 6th divine protection for that called Flavor King that makes all his food tasty regardless of what he does. Divine protection of plating makes him serve meals better. Divine protection of fresh sashimi is for sushi and sashimi. The divine protection of arithmetic makes him a math genius. The divine protection of photorealism allows his drawing to appear as if they were taken with a camera. Divine protection of fashion allows him to be good at designing clothes. The divine protection of hairdressing makes him a great hairdresser. Plus, all of the non-canon Isekai Quartet divine protections, like the divine protection of tug-of-war, steal evasion, and letting someone else take the spotlight. But last but not least, the most dangerous of all, the divine protection of sodium knowledge, which prevents him from getting salt and sugar mixed up. Divine protection of tactical nuke. If a nuke is launched at him, it simply will not go off. This may or may not be real, but I'll let you guys decide. I'm not actually gonna list every single one of them, since Reinhard has a total of 251 divine protections, but I just want to give those who don't know who he is a rough idea of how busted he'd be, since Mahoraga would need so many spins of his 8-handled wheel to be completely immune to everything Reinhard has to offer, although not all of them I've listed will be useful in battle. Starting the battle off, Megumin isn't a worthy opponent for the Dragon Sword read, so Reinhard wouldn't draw it, although I highly doubt he'd even need it against him. Let's be honest here, the first 9 Shikigamis would just be cannon fodder that Megumin would use until he realized that he was essentially cooked, and bring out Mahoraga for the real battle to begin. Mahoraga is roughly city level with a base speed of Mach 3, which will obviously adapt to his opponents during battle. But unfortunately, Reinhard is bare minimum continental with a base speed relative to the speed of lightning, so if Reinhard listens to his intuitions, then he just one-shot Mahoraga and go home. But that's obviously not fun, so I'm gonna assume that Mahoraga would stay adapted to the concepts after he's exercised, even though this isn't true, since in the past Mahoraga fought against a 6-size limitless user and killed him, and current day Mahoraga wasn't yet adapted to Gojo's infinity. Nevertheless, Mahoraga's blade would prove useless in their battle, since reverse curse energy would mean nothing, since Reinhard isn't a cursed spirit. It would probably just attempt to heal him. The reverse would also prove useless as well, since Curse energy will basically function as a curse upon him, and Reinhard is immune to those. All of Mahoraga's punches and kicks would immediately get dodged effortlessly because of both Reinhard's divine protection and his raw speed. I'm going to assume Mahoraga is a worthy opponent for the Dragon Sword Reed, plus I'll be headcanoning the version of Mahoraga who has already adapted to the concept of slushes from his battle with Sukuna into this versus battle. Even though it's heavily implied with evidence that Mahoraga loses all of his immunities whenever he is exercised in a fight. Reinhard in theory could try slashing Mahoraga up with his bare hands first, like in his battle with Sirius, only this time repeatedly, since Mahoraga would regenerate from any single lone slash. However, if he is already adapted to the slashes, then that obviously wouldn't work, making Reinhard resort to his iconic kicks. Personally, I think any one of Reinhard's full force punches or kicks would do the job, since Mahoraga would explode entirely and turn back into shadows, especially if we consider the fact that in Jujutsu Kaisen, those who use cursed energy are called sorcerers. Heck, the title literally translates to sorcerer fight. So if we use first equalization, then Reinhard's hits would dispel the mana that created Mahoraga. Not to mention the fact that he's made by using Megumin's shadow, meaning all of his attacks would be 80% less powerful against someone like Reinhard, even if he did hit him, even if they do hit. Don't worry, I hear you, this is blatantly too unfair and broken, so I will just ignore that scenario, which means no verse equalization, so Megumin's domain expansion won't work on Reinhard, since he'd be seen as an inanimate object having no curse energy. Therefore, no guarantee hit effect will be shared between Megumin and Mahoraga, since that would require verse equalization, promptly leading to Reinhard one-shotting Mahoraga with extremely low difficulty. That's no fun, so we're not using verse equalization, and we're giving Mahoraga his immunity to the concept of slashes. And on top of that, let's say Reinhard is very stupid that day and decides not to go all out from the start, even after seeing the creature regenerate to his casual attacks and gradually become more and more resistant. In character, although Reinhard is a hero who would prefer to spare his opponents so they can learn the errors in their ways, Mahoraga to him would just be some mindless monster that can't be reasoned with. And in Reinhard's words,
"My fault, it's not my fault."
If this had been a real duel, I would have withdrawn my sword the moment you lost the will to fight.
You're some kind of monster.
Indeed. I'm a monster that hunts monsters, and it's time for you to accept your fate!
So he'd just go for the kill against non-human opponents. But we're trying to make this fair here. Next, Mahoraga would slowly start adapting to Reinhard's first and second sight along with his speed, so he can finally begin to fight back. This wouldn't be unnoticed by Reinhard though, so he'd most likely draw the Dragon Sword Reed there and proceed to end their entire battle with a single attack. If you believe Mahoraga keeps his adaptations, then the slash wouldn't really hurt him. However, this wouldn't protect him from being erased from this world along with the planet's destruction and recreation. So both Mahoraga and Megumin would lose there.
Now, one of my favorite moments in all of Arc 4 is the Puck versus Reinhardt scene. This takes place in episode 15 of season 1 when Puck tries to end the world after Emilia dies. It's kinda hard to see, but the sword in Reinhardt's hand is the Dragon Sword Reed. This is the first time we've seen him use this weapon in the anime, which means that Puck was deemed a worthy opponent. But despite that, one strike from the sword was more than enough to make Puck completely disintegrate. I'd like to read you what it says in the web novel for a second. Cleaving through the air, piercing the atmosphere, and shattering the earth, The maelstrom of upswept mana severed everything along the line of the swung-out blade. The world that was covered in white was born anew. From the shattered earth, flowers budded and bloomed. Warmth returned to the air and sunlight peered through the severed sky. The Sword Saint's attack simultaneously brought about the world's end as well as its rebirth. So that was the first time we really got a solid grasp of Reinhardt's true power, and this was one of my favorite moments because I find Reinhardt to be a very interesting character.
I'm fairly certain Reinhard would win though, since he just has way too many divine protections for Mahoraga to overcome to even stand a fighting chance for a plausible victory. Okay, editing videos are becoming more and more troublesome, so from now on I'll just be using camera footage of me talking for longer videos. For all those who are interested in getting an early sneak peek, then here, just scan this QR code with your phones if you're on PC. If you're on mobile, though, I'll try to remember to add a link in the comments and description so you can. And with that, have a great day or night, whatever time you guys happen to be watching this, and peace out. See you in the next one. Awesome weeps.